The fact that CEOs are rewarded for layoffs is ludicrous. Layoffs are never, ever good financially for the company. We have decades of economic studies showing this. And also, I have a master's in economics from Berkeley as well, and I wrote a book on labor law while I was there. So this is an area that I'm so deeply passionate about. Boards of directors are failing in their fiduciary obligations to shareholders by not kicking out the activist investors, getting Wall Street out of their decision making. Wall Street loves layoffs. Wall Street loves layoffs. And none of them has ever run a company.
Hi there, I'm Denise Chaffin, and I'm your podcast host for Talking TA. And today I have with me Valerie Alexander. And Valerie is the CEO of a company called Speak Happiness, which I love the name of your company, Valerie.
You.
And you've got a list here of different positions that you've held in the past. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you to give us a little bit more about your background and about your company.
Sure. Well, Speak Happiness is a provider of workplace happiness consulting and keynote speaking and corporate training and also primarily workplace happiness assessments. So the companies who want to do significantly better by focusing on the happiness of their workforce have the resources they need to do it. It doesn't happen naturally. It requires a lot of intention, a lot of attention, and so we provide that. So, workplace happiness assessments, I'm a keynote speaker for conferences and annual meetings and events. And also, we do some bespoke management training around after we've done an assessment, what is really needed to create a happier workforce.
All right, so I have to ask, now what brought you to create this business? What was your wow moment or your experience that would
Sure.
inspire you?
I have a extremely diverse career history. I started as a securities lawyer in the Silicon Valley. I became a venture capital consultant. I was an investment banker. I was an executive at an internet startup. And then I moved to Los Angeles and I had a very successful run as a screenwriter and a film director. And then when my union went on strike, I wrote a book about happiness. I wrote a book called Happiness as a Second Language. And becoming immersed in happiness as a goal, as a movement, as things that people could train for. I got a certification in the science of happiness from the Greater Good Science Center at Berkeley, which is where I had done my law degree and my master's. So I had an affinity for Berkeley to begin with. And that's when I discovered workplace happiness. I was doing the deep dive on the brain science behind happiness. And I realized this is something it's costing our economy hundreds of billions of dollars to have unhappy workforces. It's a very easy thing to fix, and if it was a line item in the P&L statement, every CEO would make it their top priority. So, I decided I had the right career history to be able to do this. I had the skill set because I had been a keynote speaker for several years by that point, and I am extremely passionate about this topic, that people should be happy in their jobs. That's not a luxury, that's a need. And so I wanted to expand that opportunity.
Okay, so I have to ask, how do you convince people that it's a need?
Through statistics. You can very easily dollarize your unhappiness of your workforce. There's multiple long-ranging workplace happiness studies. Harvard Business School does workplace happiness studies, UC Riverside, and Gallup especially. And they have a report called the State of the American Workforce Report. Now, they have stopped specifically metricizing this in the way that they did in the past. So the last one where they gave these metrics was 2019. But an when you break the workforce down into quadrants, you have the happy, the unhappy, and the very unhappy. Between the very unhappy, the bottom quadrant, and the very happy, the top quadrant, there is 41% less absenteeism. There is between 29% and 58% less turnover, depending on the industry. In low turnover industries like professional jobs, union jobs, government jobs, the turnover can be reduced by as much as 58% when your workforce is very happy. Those are just the bare minimum, turnover and absenteeism. In medical settings, you have 58% less medical malpractice when your workforce is happy compared to unhappy. And think about that. People are careful in their job when they're happy, or the corollary, when they're unhappy, they don't care. You have 28% less shrinkage, which is theft and destruction of property and inventory. If somebody works in a restaurant and they're walking out the back door at the end of the night and they look over and notice that somebody left a 50-pound sack of shrimp out of the freezer, your very happy employee who loves their job is going to haul over there and toss it back in the freezer. And your very unhappy employee is going to say, "It's not my job." And these, I can go through these statistics for more than a dozen metrics. I'll give you the biggest one that is very eye-opening. You have 70% fewer workers' compensation claims when your workforce is very happy. I'm sorry, in manufacturing, you have 40% fewer product defects. A very happy workforce goes straight to your bottom line. Straight, you can dollarize this really easily. In law firms, the average cost of losing a trained associate is $350,000. That's the cost to replace a mid-level associate, $350,000, because it costs between 50% and 200% of the salary of somebody who is trained, to replace them. And so if you're a partner in a law firm and you're watching this or listening to this, and you aren't making the happiness of your associates a top priority, that's coming straight out of your pocket. That's coming straight out of your partner share, and it is a very fixable issue.
Now, what about like bigger companies, like say manufacturing? Let's look at manufacturing, and you mentioned healthcare too.
Healthcare, a perfect example. In healthcare, to replace a registered nurse costs between 56 and $61,000. If you have a trained registered nurse, it costs between 56 and $61,000 to replace them. And so many healthcare companies, there's companies in the health space, don't put any effort into policies or training that ensure their workforce is happy in their jobs.
And the other thing too, I've noticed with the nursing pools, a lot of the nurses that sign on to work for those nursing pools are only putting in 13-week schedules for each place. And so they're moving around a lot. So when you have people moving in and out all the time, what is that costing the company as well?
The institutional knowledge is gone, and so that is another thing that, and again, it goes straight to your bottom line, it goes straight to patient safety, and it doesn't take the idea that, "Oh, we'll use temp nurses from a locum tenens company to save money." If every CEO in the country were held to the five-year look-back standard, they're not saving money. I mean, that is the issue. Globally, you're not saving money. You're saving money in one sector, maybe payroll or insurance in this quarter.
How many CEOs are doing a 5-year look back in order to understand what their losses are?
I don't know of any. I'm gonna be completely serious. I don't know of any. Their stock bonuses are tied to quarterly and annual results. They get I know that one of the things you and I had planned to discuss is layoffs. The fact that CEOs are rewarded for layoffs is ludicrous. Layoffs are never, ever good financially for the company. We have decades of economic studies showing this. And also, I have a master's in economics from Berkeley as well, and I wrote a book on labor law while I was there. So this is an area that I'm so deeply passionate about, that there just needs to be boards of directors are failing in their fiduciary obligations to shareholders by not kicking out the activist investors, getting Wall Street out of their decision making. Wall Street loves layoffs. Wall Street loves layoffs. Why? Because there are essentially 30 white guys working as analysts in each sector determining the price value of the stock, and none of them has ever run a company.
Right. Right. I
Mm.
read recently, this is for the semiconductor industry, that most of the board members, in fact, I don't have the data though around it. I wish I did now that we're having this conversation. Most of the board members working in the semiconductor industry do not have a semiconductor background. So I wonder, is that the same case then in other industries like healthcare, where they don't even, the board members can't even make, I guess, industry related decisions since they don't have industry experience? How are they even participating in board decisions?
Board membership is a quid pro quo a lot of times. It's, "Oh, you serve on that board so that you can serve on that board so that you can serve on that board, and we all get stock bonuses." But, yes, there are going to be some board members who know about your industry. There's going to be much more in boards of professional board members, people who then you think of, "Okay, well, they can at least read a financial statement," and that's fine. The board members need to just hold a tighter rein over the executive decision making and say, "No, layoffs, prove to us that you need to have a layoff. Prove to us that that's going to give us a better 3-year financial outcome." 3 years from now, 5 years from now, it never does. The biggest problem are, like I said, the Wall Street analysts, the people who determine the stock prices and have never they might have worked in the semiconductor industry at one point, but most likely they came up through investment banking, where the sector they got assigned when they came out of business school was semiconductor, and now they're experts in semiconductor industries, and they decide that "Oh, this stock is a buy, this stock is a sell, here's a target earnings per share price that we should have." And it's almost all made up numbers, and I know this, I was a tech sector investment banker. So there's the relationship between what the tech sector analysts say a stock is worth or should be worth to the actual outcomes created by the company is very tenuous.
That's amazing, amazing, and that we're in well, just past 2025, and that people haven't, like, taken time or the resources to do, like you said, the 5-year look back, to look at who's serving their boards, to look at how much experienced people they have on their boards in that particular industry, whether it be healthcare, manufacturing, semiconductor, whatever it is, right? And that they're putting that much reliance on Wall Street to determine things that are so critical to a company like layoffs.
It's not that they're relying on Wall Street, they're responding to Wall Street. Wall Street's saying, "Do something," and like, "How about layoffs?" And Wall Street's like, "Well, okay." I mean, that's what we saw happen to Disney when they had an activist investor who said, "You have to I'm going to take over your company unless you do something to change the value of the stock," and, Bob Iger randomly said, "Okay, we'll lay off 9,000 people." There weren't 9,000 people at Disney who merited being laid off. And so the layoffs are in response to the analysts on Wall Street, but when you say they're relying on consulting companies that are bringing in the preset, prefab, "This is the way we do it," and I won't name any of them by name, you've heard of them. They come in a friend of mine worked for a company where in her division, they brought in one of these consulting companies for I think the contract was $500,000 a month. 'Cause the company wanted to, I don't know, make more money or save money, whatever their outcome was. This consulting company came in and they presented my friend and they said, "Here, you have to lay off 30 people in your division," because they had literally just looked at the number of employees in her division and decided that 30 people is the right number to lay off, and they gave her a packet for how to do it, none of which had anything to do with the work they were doing or who should or shouldn't be laid off. And as she was flipping through the packet thinking, this is garbage, this has nothing to do with my workforce," she came across a page where they had forgotten to change the name of the previous client. When you talk to people who are on the front lines dealing with these large consulting companies, they all have those kinds of stories. And so that's the other thing. If I were in charge of this part of our economy. I would say companies are not allowed to respond to what Wall Street I don't think analysts should even be allowed to voice opinions about what companies are doing, and they are not allowed to bring in you can bring in one of these large scale consulting companies, don't pay them for 5 years. Say, "All right, we need you to stand behind what you're telling us to do, so we'll pay for this in 5 years when we see if it actually works, if it actually improves our outcomes."
They have to earn a living, so you could do like a retainer with them, but not pay any more than the upfront retainer so they can pay their expenses, but not pay any more for the 5 years.
Let them do structured debt to pay their bills. If they have actual faith that what the service they're providing is valuable and is going to create a greater outcome for their client companies 5 years later, great. Let them borrow the money it takes to keep the doors open now, and then they can get paid in 5 years when it's proven that laying off a third of the workforce was the good idea, but that's what kept the company alive.
Have you brought this up before in some of your other talks?
I have not ever I've written about this, I have never had a conversation about this. I definitely wouldn't talk about this from the stage because client. But I like I said, I was an investment banker, I saw this firsthand. I've seen so many companies do a layoff as the knee-jerk response to anything, to a shrinking market space, to changing technology that they don't know how to keep up with. And if they would just sit down with their employees, sit down with your employees and say, "Hey, we don't want to lay anybody off. What can we do to remain competitive? What can we do to increase our market share?" E I have I I am a consultant. I go into companies and I have conversations with the employees, and then I share them with management because I'm the person who will listen to the employee without the defensiveness, without the gaslighting, but I'm also the person who has the ability to tell management without it risking my job. I'm like, You paid me to tell you this," but this is the definition after years of doing this, the definition I have of a consultant. It is the person who asks your employees the questions you should have asked them in the first place, and then gets paid a substantial amount of money to tell you what your employees would have told you for free.
Wow. Wow. Now let's segue. Okay, I didn't expect this conversation to go in this direction, but I love it. So let's segue then into the company culture then around this because we were talking about that before, and it's one of the points I wanted to bring up with you. With I mean, because it's an overused term. People are tired of hearing about company culture, but how can we actually make company culture something that people can sink their teeth into now with this kind of data, with this kind of advice, these suggestions?
All culture comes from the top down. I have to make this very clear. It's almost impossible to have a bottom up culture change. If whoever is at the top doesn't buy into workplace happiness, doesn't buy into training and development, doesn't buy into equity and inclusion, it is going to be impossible to create a culture that values those things. If you wanna look at my favorite example I'm using right now of big wins in company culture is the Indiana University football team. The Indiana University football team had the record for the most losses of any Division I NCAA football team. They were the losingest program, and 2 years ago, they hired a new coach, Curt Cignetti, and he went 11-2 in his first year, and they have the potential, I don't know when this is going to air, but on January 19th of becoming the first 16-0 team in FBS history. And Curt Cignetti brought a different culture. And he brought a culture that focused on individual accomplishment. What does each person need? What does this running back need to give their peak performance as opposed to what this running back needs? He will hold practices that are only 30 minutes long because he says, "What, we just need 30 minutes to work on this thing." And then he holds himself and his assistant coaches to that 30 minutes. They don't have time bleed. Can you imagine a leader at a company saying, "We only need a 30-minute meeting for this," and then they have one 30-minute meeting and it ends after 30 minutes? He will sometimes randomly, if he thinks the team is doing really well and might need a break, they'll show up for practice and he'll say, "Guys, practice is off today. Go relax for the afternoon." And he has assistant coaches who have followed him from school to school to school, and people who could go get head coaching jobs now for more money after what Indiana has done, and they're staying with him because he prioritizes their lifestyle. They don't pull all-nighters in the coaching room.
Reminds me of the Ted Lasso series.
Yes. Ted Lasso was such a perfect example of a coach that looks at the humanity of the people playing the sport and coaching the sport and prioritizes that, and therefore gets better outcomes.
Wow. Now how come we not hearing more about this Indiana coach?
Well, it depends on the communities you're in. I'm a
Well,
big college
I
football
guess
person, so
yeah, but he should be making big news. Regardless, he should be making big news because here's the thing, somebody like that could help to lead the way to basically be at the forefront of some big changes with corporate America.
if every and believe me, half the CEOs in America are going to be watching the Indiana-Miami game on Monday, and please God for me, let Indiana win. But partly to prove my point, and also partly I grew up in Indiana, but that they should be seeing this is a turnaround that is unheard of. This is a school that went 3-9 and had the losingest record in NCAA history and went 11-2 the following season and is about to win the national championship the following season. Unheard of, and I am going to go out on a limb and say you can track all of that to the culture that one coach created. The person at the top created the culture that says, "We're all going to work very hard," that sets high expectations. People want high expectations. They want someone who has faith in them and believes in them and thinks that they can live up to their best selves, that they get a sense of accomplishment.
Why is it and I have to say this out loud. Why is it then that we have these CEOs who are so hell-bent on their own salaries, their own composition, the me syndrome that seems to be going on here with the stock they get, RSUs that they supposedly merit. I mean, why is that we have that and we don't have more people at the top who are looking at the people working for them instead of themselves and what they're gonna gain?
It all comes down to what gets rewarded. It comes down to what gets rewarded. Wall Street and these Wall Street analysts reward these, mm, uh, macho cowboy CEOs who, lay people off for, uh I can't even explain, like, there's also a little bit of bubble of preaching to the choir, of insulated, not realizing, "Wow, there's a much better way to do this." And again, it takes 5 years to get the better outcome. But, eh, why is it that Costco can pay a living wage and have health insurance for all of their employees, but Sam's Club swears they can't afford that? Well, because the CEO of Costco is not getting $40 million a year to be the CEO of
Yeah,
Costco.
yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, you got the Walmart thing going on behind Sam's Club, so,
Yep.
yeah, to your point.
Yes.
Okay, let me ask another question, and I'm sure I'll hear about it, but that's okay. I need to ask. So I read an article probably, I don't know, a year ago that only 4% of all CEOs in the United States are female. How is that impacting?
It's not of all CEOs in the US. It is of all CEOs in the Fortune 500. So here and this is the saddest part, 10 years ago, it was, we hit a whopping 5.7% at one point, and now it's gone back down. There are multiple factors that go into this. It goes down to what gets rewarded. This is Interestingly enough, I wrote a book about this. It's called How Women Can Succeed in the Workplace Despite Having Female Brains. And it's because there are actual different instincts between the way a neurotypical cisgendered female brain operates and a neurotypical cisgendered male brain. And that comes from 2 million years of evolution of the men who were most likely to succeed and pass their genes on to the next generation, and brain activity is hereditary. They were the ones who were being most successful in hunting and combat. The women most likely to pass their genes on to the next generation and have their offspring survive until they reach reproductive age were the ones who were most successful at literally everything else. Every single other thing was done by women. They sewed the clothes, they made the meat, they tended to the sick, they cared for the elderly, they raised the children, they fished, they foraged, they engaged in early stages of agriculture, they hunted small animals, they did everything other than hunt big meat and protect the cave. As a result, and by the way, that division of labor took place when we began living in tribes. When we began living in tribes and the tribe had to be concerned about keeping the offspring of the tribe alive. The tribe's ability to reproduce itself was a survival concern for the tribe. When that began, when we first began living in tribes like that, the human brain was the size of a meatball. When we were just singular family units, we were basically an amygdala and some reactive goo. And once we began living in tribes and we needed different skills to keep the tribe alive, that's when our brain began tripling in size. And that's when we added a prefrontal cortex, which controls our social interaction, our decision making, our control of emotions, all up here. This evolved into existence after after our survival skills were different by gender. So the male survival skills that developed were the ones that were going to make you succeed in hunting and combat, competition, quick decision making, taking risk, being able to shut down the brain when it's not in use. The female survival skills that we developed in our prefrontal cortex were things like consensus building, group decision making, eliminating risk. Women were in charge of keeping the offspring of the tribe alive. You couldn't take a risk. If you took a risk, an offspring of the tribe might die
So why is it though that amongst, like you said, Fortune 500, and thank you for correcting me on that. But still, that's a lot of companies. Since we are at such a low number of women who are CEOs and leading companies, how why in 2026 are we still there with all of these with all this awareness?
because back then, when men were engaging in hunting and combat and developing those survival skills, they were the only ones leaving the caves. So they were only encountering other men. And when men are only encountering other men, it was combat between tribes that eventually became commerce between tribes. And so men got to design all the systems of commerce. And when you're designing a system from the ground up, you're going to design that system to give you the greatest rewards. So, what do we reward most highly in the corporate world? Competition, quick decision making, taking risk. What do we diminish? Consensus building. And how many people have you heard? Somebody gets more information and changes their mind. Is that treated as a good thing in the corporate world? No. And that's how women make decisions. Women gather information, eliminate risk, and make decisions. Women make better decisions. We gather all the information. If new information comes in, we're willing to change the decision. We had a US president who referred to himself as the decider. He said, I'm the decider, because being the decider is how they define leadership. And Patton said, lead me, follow me, or get out of the way. Well, where is the building of consensus in that? There isn't any. And so women's natural behavior actually gets better outcomes. And we've seen, again, the statistics all are there. Companies with female diverse boards of directors have 31% higher stock value. Companies with racially and female diverse management teams have 33% more profits. The numbers are there if people would be willing to acknowledge them. The male behavior is what the system was set up to reward. And so, as long as it's going to continue to reward that system, regardless of the outcomes it gets, There's 2 things about it. One, we're just going to naturally see that as, that's leadership. "Oh, you made a fast decision, you're plowing forward with it." There's a phrase that gets used to apply to this type of behavior, which is often wrong, but never uncertain.
Wow. I mean, I'm just floored by this data that you're sharing. I had no idea. Well, okay, so let's talk about then inclusion. Okay, so we're not supposed to be doing DEI anymore, right? Or having discussions around it, and all of that buildup, bringing women into the workforce, giving them more power, giving them more opportunity. Yeah, I mean, heck, how long have we been voting,
Oh,
right?
102 years. Yeah.
103 year, okay. So we've only been voting for a very short amount of time, really, when you look at the cycle of the human race. I mean, yeah, and so over that 103 years, we have kind of moved into some new roles, obviously, and we have taken some control of our own destiny. I mean, we are allowed to run businesses, but when you talk about the Fortune 500 and this low, low number, what happened to DEI? What's happening now that we've removed the word or the acronym DEI, and now we've got people who are using the term inclusion, and we talked about the other day, to kind of replace DEI, but it's still kind of an all-encompassing word that would give us more opportunity. What programs are we gonna be able to kind of continue moving forward with to kinda keep the ball rolling to see more women gaining momentum and gaining strength for powerful positions and leadership roles? Because, I mean, obviously, there's a problem there, and I didn't expect our conversation to go in this direction, but I don't care. We're here, so let's discuss it.
In many ways, this is going to play itself out beautifully over time because the companies that are getting this right, which is creating inclusive workplaces, will just do better. They will be more successful. I have an analogy I say where if your company has the best chimpanzees working on your sales team and you have cornered the banana market, but you have completely missed the fish market because you don't have any penguins working there. So you're going to hire a couple penguins and they're doing great. They're killing it. They're bringing you the fish market, but you still have all your meetings on the top branch of the tree. The penguins, they're going to get to that meeting. They'll be a little late. They'll be exhausted. But then you're going to point your chimpanzees and say, well, they got here on time. The penguins who are killing it are not going to put up with that. And guess what? They're going to go to the company that embraces their nature as penguins and says, thanks for bringing that whole fish market. And you know what? They're going to take the best chimpanzees with them. Because the best chimpanzees are gonna work at the company that also has the fish market, because that's the one that's gonna grow and be bigger and be better. So if you are not creating an inclusive culture, you aren't just losing the opportunity to have phenomenal employees who don't look like everyone who's always had the job, you're gonna lose the best employees who do look like everyone else, because 'cause they're smart enough to realize, "Oh, that's the sustainable company." In 2030 white people will no longer be the majority in the United States. But if your company doesn't know how to hire anyone other than white men to be in leadership roles, 2 decades from now, you don't have a leadership team because you cannot compete. And one of the things that happens to women and to people of color is we are held to phenomenally different standards, and people don't want to admit it. I the one way I can really convince the people who don't wanna hear it is I ask, "How did Jackie Robinson have to behave? Ho what did Jackie Robinson have to do as a player and as a man?" And the answer was he had to be perfect. He had to be perfect at all times in all situations, and that is an unsustainable standard.
Well, and not only that, but women they develop a reputation for being ball busters, too arrogant, too overpowering. We get called names. I mean, it's just horrible. The abuse and the mistreatment of women that do try to improve their careers or move into leadership roles. And just,
Well, one of the things that causes that also is women see men getting ahead and they're like, "Well, I guess I should behave like that." And I always tell women, "Don't start behaving like men." I never tell women to behave like men. I say, "Look at what's getting rewarded and figure out how to display the traits that are getting rewarded."
well, let's talk about a few of those. What
Okay.
are some of the traits for getting rewarded as women?
Quick decision making gets rewarded. I had this happen when I was a lawyer. I inherited a client. We had an associate, one of the $350,000 costs. We had an associate that left, and I got a client of his, and it was a mess. Like, he had not papered their deals correctly. He had not kept their books up. I spent so much time cleaning up. And after months, when we started I was a corporate finance lawyer. When we started doing another financing for them, which is the fun stuff. I mean, that's what you wanna raise money for your clients. That's what you wanna that's why you do corporate finance. The partner I work for came into my office and he said, "I just got off the phone with their CEO. They asked for a different associate. They don't like you." Literally, he said, "They don't like you." He said, "They miss Rob." And I said, "But Rob gave them terrible legal service." He said, "Doesn't matter. When they called Rob, he gave them an answer. And when they call you, you say, 'I'll look it up and get back to you.' They don't like that." And I said, "But Rob was wrong most of the time." So he said, "Doesn't matter." Literally, the partner I work for said, "Doesn't matter. When a client calls, it's because they want an answer, give them one." And so the I get the call that says, "Hey, the CEO wants to give stock as our Christmas bonuses this year. Can we do that?" And I got that call. Now, typically, I would have said, "Oh, let me look that up and get back to you." What I don't realize is that on their side of the equation, the CEO asked some vice president, "Can we give stock for Christmas bonuses?" And the vice president went and asked the finance department, and they don't know, and they asked the HR department, and they don't know. And so somebody's picked up the phone to call me. By now, there's 4 different departments who need this answer to this question. Everybody has somebody else they answer to. Picking up the phone and calling the lawyer is an expensive call. So what I didn't realize is that somebody picking up the phone and calling me, there's a lot of pressure on their side of that phone call. So I got that call, "Can we give stock as our Christmas bonuses?" And I was like, "Well, it's October, so they probably want the answer to be yes." Yes. Click. And then I went and looked it up. That's the part the previous attorney had not done. I looked it up. In that particular situation, I was wrong. They could not. They did not have the authorized shares in their pool. So I thought, "All right, I have to call somebody and tell them I was wrong." We're gonna pay attention to that in a second. Uh, who do I need to call? Well, I don't need to call finance. I don't need to call HR. I'm gonna call the vice president, who is second under the president, who probably is the person who has to deliver this news. And this is exactly how that call went, because I actually had a mentor who helped me through these things. This is exactly how the call went. I called that vice president and I said, "Hi, I looked into your question about stock for Christmas bonuses a little further. It turns out you don't have enough approved shares in the plan. So I wrote a board resolution for you. We can do a board mailing or you've got time to bring it up at the next meeting. What do you want to do?" And he said, "Oh, we'll do it at the next meeting." I said, "Great." And he said, "Wow, thanks." I didn't call him and say, "Hey, I was wrong when I told you." What I did was I called him and said, "You have a problem, but I have a solution for you." One of the things we do as women is we're afraid to give an answer. It's why we talked about the healthcare profession at the start of this call. Male nurses are rising much more quickly in the ranks than female nurses because the great majority of doctors are still men, and male doctors prefer working with male nurses because male nurses will give them an answer when they ask a question, even if it's wrong. The doctor will walk in, "Is this patient prepped for surgery?" A male nurse will say, "Yes." And a female nurse will say, "I'm fairly certain we've gone through the whole checklist. I have 2 more things I have to check off, but by the time you come back in the room, that we will be ready." What the answer the doctor wants is yes. And if you're wrong, you don't run around announcing that you're wrong. The best way I can make sure people truly understand this is, as a society, throughout the world, doesn't matter, as a society, who do we value more highly? a firefighter or a fire inspector?
Firefighter.
Yeah, of course, they're heroes. We have calendars with them, right? The firefighter puts out the fire. The fire inspector stops a fire from starting in the first place. Women are better at stopping fires from starting in the first place. That is a low credit activity. So, one of the things I tell leadership at all levels is you better figure out how to identify who's stopping fires from starting and rewarding them for that. Because if people don't get rewarded for stopping a fire from starting, they'll leave and you will have a lot more fire.
I love that analogy.
If your skill is to prevent a fire from starting in the first place and a fire starts anyway, be the person who puts it out.
Yeah. Right, right. Be the
And
person.
don't go around saying, "Oh, I blew it. I didn't prevent that fire from starting." Nobody's keeping track of that. Men get rewarded for putting out fires, even if it's the fire they started.
Well, a lot of us have learned, I think, because I've been self-employed since I was 24 years old and had to put out a lot of fires and learn the hard way, like you're saying, on for my own businesses, how to be a leader and whatnot. But the risk taking and admitting when you're wrong. So one of the things I had to learn the hard way, based on what you're saying, is how to find the solution before I admit that there was an issue to begin with. Find the solution and focus on the solution. I've always said, don't focus on the problem, focus on the solution. Find the solution and lean into that. I've told my teams that forever, forever, ever, ever.
A and again, bring those instinctively female traits if you need to of consensus building. If I'm looking for a solution to something, I'm okay with calling 3 other people and say, "Here's an issue I need a solution for," and getting their input. You don't have to go it alone to put out a fire. Use your natural skills. But the other thing women do, oof, we credit everybody else on the team. Like, "Oh, wow, this is an amazing solution you came up with. Oh, thanks. Bob told me this, and John told me this, and Angela told me this." And it's like, you know what? The answer to this is an amazing solution is thank you.
We do have to start giving ourselves more credit though.
Well, one of the things that happens to women a lot is we get talked over in meetings. We get interrupted. If you bring something up and it's a valuable point and everybody moves right past it, there's 2 things that can happen. Then 2 minutes later, somebody says the exact same thing. You can say, "Oh, thank you, Bob, for bringing it back to my point. I'm really happy we're going to discuss that now." That is you're okay to do that. That's one thing. But the second thing is pay attention in the room if that's happening, and this is whether you're a man or a woman or a Martian or a dog, I don't care who you are. If you're in that room and a woman says something and people just go past without talking, you be the person to amplify her voice. You be the person to say, "Oh, I don't think Denise was done with what she was saying. I'd like us to discuss it further." And then when you amplify someone's voice, you do not repeat what they said. You guide the conversation back to them so that they can be heard.
Wow. Now let's talk about too the risks because you made a comment a while ago about risk, and then you gave the example of what happened with the stock for the one company. So when you take a risk like that and you do say yes or you do answer something quickly, because I mean the first thing that comes to mind is okay, I'm taking a risk answering something that quickly without doing my natural female wanting to check it out first before giving an answer. How do we minimize risk though as females and as or as people who are and like you mentioned people of color, all of us that are in the minority, we are all minorities. How do we minimize our risks so that we aren't afraid then to take more risks?
So get good at risk assessment. And that is when that client called and said, "Can we give stock as our Christmas bonuses?" Like I said, it was October. So I can say yes. If that was December 15th, I would not have said yes. I would have said, "I'm going to have to look that up before I get back to you." The example I like to use from film set, 'cause I was a director, is if you're using what's called house power, if you're on a location and you're using house power, which means you're plugging everything's into the outlets in the rooms. You don't have a generator outside. And someone comes in and says, "Hey, can I plug something into this outlet?" The answer is What do you want to plug in? If it's our lead actress wants to charge her phone, the answer is yes. If it's, well, we need to light night for day and I need to plug in a 10K, the answer is, oh, hell no. And if the answer is, well, we've got a bank of fluorescents, then you say, great, go find the best boy and get the voltmeter and plug it in, and we'll see if this outlet can handle the volts. Give an answer. Don't say, I don't know. Don't even say, let me look it up and get back to you.
Oh my god, I'm learning so much right now. This is absolutely amazing. Okay, let's go back to the inclusion. No, as far as so as we're evolving, and you said that we're getting there, and I hope you're right, and I hope that you said by 2030, right, that we should see an increase then in
By 2030, the US will no longer be a majority white country. I don't know that that means we will have more inclusive leadership. I talk to companies a lot where they're like, "Oh, no, we're very diverse." I'm like, "Is all your diversity at the $20 an hour level?" But when we get up here, it's a snow-capped mountain. That's not diversity.
a snow-capped mountain. I love that. Oh my god, that is so great.
So, w ag again, we have to start holding people to the same standards. We have to start saying we have to attach performance evaluations and rewards to outcomes actually achieved. We we have a real issue where some people fail up and others fail out,
Mm.
you
What
know?
is the difference?
For a lot of women, a lot of people of color, it's one strike and you're out. It's in education, it's called the Pygmalion principle. If a teacher believes a student is brilliant at math, and then that student starts struggling with a math problem, that teacher will give them more resources, more time, a little more attention, because right, they're brilliant at math.
You're brilliant, right?
Yeah, if the teacher believes that kid's a big dummy and that kid starts struggling with the same exact math problem, the teacher's gonna be like, "Okay, well, look, let's just move on." They're not going to give their time and resources and attention to the kid who's probably not gonna get it anyway. We see this in the workplace. If somebody comes in and they look like no one who has ever done that job, and they have the same struggles any newbie would have with that job, it's called confirmation bias. It's like, "Oh, well, see, I knew they couldn't do it." Whereas if the person who, I don't know, is the son of the CEO comes in and starts having all those same struggles, you start saying, "Well, make sure they got trained, make sure that somebody mentors them." They get second chances. And when you look like the person who does this job, you get second chances. And that's everybody has to have the same opportunity to fail. That's when you're inclusive. When you're inclusive isn't when everyone has the same opportunity to succeed. It's when everybody has the same opportunity to fail and keep going.
Sure, sure. Okay, so let's dial in on that just a little bit more because that is gonna be an important part, I think, of we talk about reassessing culture here and redeveloping good culture. What about then taking the people then who are failing, and how can we then give them more opportunity, recognize that they need more opportunity? Where can we start with that? Because I know you said we can't build good culture from the bottom up, but can't we at least try?
Well, when I say bottom up, like, I'm talking about the entire structural organization. But if you're a leader of a team and one person is struggling, 2 people are struggling, but maybe in different ways, just make sure they're getting the same treatment, the same perception, the same opportunities. If you hear someone say like, if somebody is struggling and you hear someone else saying, go, "Well, of course. Well, what did we think?" Shut that down as a leader. Say, "No, we don't view things that way." There's a big thing in mentorship. We say, "We'll mentor people." But we don't mentor equally without even noticing we're doing it. Women more often get mentored on having enough confidence in the workplace. Again, because we're swimming against the current. When you're swimming against the current, you look over at the guy swimming in the current and you think, "Oh, that guy's a good swimmer." Oh, by the way, the guy swimming in the current is thinking, "I'm a good swimmer." Yeah. But so we don't have enough faith we don't have faith in the value we're bringing because the value we bring doesn't always get rewarded, as we shared. And so women get mentored on having more confidence. People of color get mentored on how to fit in, which is terrible, by the way. Your culture should not require people to fit into your culture. It should embrace that people are additive to your culture, but that's a second thing. But while the women are getting mentored on confidence, so the people of color are being mentored on how to fit in, the white men are getting mentored on the business skills and financial acumen they need to advance in the company. So pay really close to your mentorship. If a woman or a person of color is at this level and we want them to get them to this level, focus all of your mentorship on this skills gap. Get them up by skills so that when it's time to get and by the way, when they have more skills and they feel more acknowledged and rewarded, they're going to have the confidence. They are going to seem to fit better. Going back to workplace happiness, there are only 3 things required for workplace happiness. You only need 3 things in your workplace to make sure you have a happy workforce. A sense of accomplishment. Everybody has to feel that they're doing something every day. People feel like nobody wants to trade hours for dollars. Hours are more valuable than dollars. People want to feel that they have invested their time in some way of value to the world. So give everybody a sense of accomplishment, give everybody autonomy. Once somebody knows what they're doing, please don't micromanage them. Let them do it. And then give everybody acknowledgement. When somebody contributes, let them know that you've seen that I saw your contribution. That's it. If you show up for work every single day and you have accomplishment, autonomy, and acknowledgement, you're going to love your job. If you, as a leader, figure out how to give those 3 things to everyone in your workforce every day, it becomes a more inclusive workforce.
Wow. I wonder if they're gonna do like the guy who's the coach. What'd you say his name is? Craig something?
Kurt Signetti.
Craig Signetti. I wonder if he'll be like the next Ted Lasso, and there'll be a movie and a book written about him that people can actually purchase and utilize his what he's doing to develop those 3 key criteria, right, to help people become happy in the workplace. Yeah, I mean, seriously, because it sounds like he's doing a great job there, and why aren't we focusing more on those people? Why aren't we looking at those leaders and bringing them into light, whether even the males, right? I mean, doesn't matter. If they are providing that criteria to keep people happy in the workplace, why aren't we focusing more on that? Why is there such a huge focus on the greed and on the money and on the power mongers, right? That aren't providing that.
Partly they suck up the most oxygen in the room. That is a big part of it. But also, we see that as, "Oh, he's an exception. He's the unicorn." Like, he's a unicorn. It's like, no, he has a set of trainable skills. And the biggest creator of workplace unhappiness is what I call accidental managers. As soon as I say accidental managers, everybody's like, "Oh, uh-huh, I get that," because we put people in charge of other people without bothering to make sure that they have the skill set for it. Or we put people in charge of other people without thinking of them as managers, so we can go back to healthcare. Doctors have never been given 1 minute of managerial skills training. How many people answer to a doctor? Lawyers have never been given 1 minute of managerial skills training. I taught at Berkeley Law, and I took an hour out of my syllabus to teach my students. Here's how you speak to your assistant. Here's how you speak to your junior associates. And most of them was like, "Why are you wasting our time? You're going off on a tangent." Like, they got in the workforce.
I have a sister who is a professor at Northern Arizona University here in Arizona, and she was wanting to retire, and the university asked her to stay on because she teaches student teachers how to teach children how to read. And so she's got a pretty good position, and they said, "Well, unfortunately, if you leave, they're not gonna let us backfill your position, and we need somebody like you who can teach student teachers how to teach. So please stay on." So she agreed to stay on to continue the program.
But again, You have to look at the decision making to not fill that position. That's the insanity. Who makes that decision?
That's what I told her.
That I there are so many easy things to focus on, and the the one of the reasons we don't have better managerial skills training is that almost all managers who fall into one of 2 categories, they're natural, they're good. There are people who are naturals. They're naturally I'm sure in your career you've seen it, there are some naturally good managers.
There are, there are. Yeah, and there's some that are yeah, and it's funny, I mean, having worked as a consultant for a lot of different companies as well as a TA practitioner, they call us, I guess, now, but working for different people in HR, and I'm talking men and women, to see how many are good and how many people would follow, and how many of us wanna follow those people into their next jobs or wherever they go. Versus I remember one guy, and his first name was Bob, and I'll leave it at that. He was a horrible manager. He was sexist. He would come up and touch you. And in fact, I thought, who do I report this guy to? He's the head of HR. You know, seriously. But I did not stay. I was out. But the thing is everybody left. And then everybody's left. What happened here? So then they wound up replacing him with a female.
Good call.
But here, we could keep going on. So there's something I want to bring up though that I did want to talk to you about with respect to the inclusion piece here because it's so paramount in order to I think help develop that culture, whether it's at the lower levels in an organization or the top level, whatever it is. Employee resource groups, you brought up a while ago, women are given a certain set of skills to learn, and then people of color are taught to fit in, right? So they developed employee resource groups. It's a woman who's a CEO, big consulting firm, and as an aerotech maybe? Anyway, she was talking about moving the programs forward. She said, we're going to call inclusion. We're going to move. We have worked so hard to bring these groups in, and they're working so well we wanna keep moving them forward, so we're just gonna call these inclusion programs, but we will keep the employee resource groups as well. So let's talk about that for a minute. How successful are employee resource groups in an organization in order to keep people happy?
That is that's like saying, "How successful is a student teacher?" Well, it depends on how well they were trained and how much structure they have. Every There's 2 things going into your question. One is what is the mission of the employee resource group? When you ask how successful it is, a lot of employee resource groups, and I'm not saying one way or the other whether this is good, bad, I would not disparage. A lot of employee resource groups are solely for the purpose of having a place where employees who have a shared identity can just get together and be. And I've heard them referred to as complaint groups. That bugs the living daylights out of me. The people who are if I'm the only woman on a team of engineers, if I am the only person of color in the sales department, please God, give me once a month a meeting I can get together with other people who look like me and we can just talk about our experiences. We are not there to complain. We're there to just find a common outlet. And that's fine. That is, in many ways, the goal of those employee resource groups, and I'm not going to say that that's a wrong way to have employee resource groups. Companies will then frown on that. Companies don't see the value of that, which is another mistake. One of the factors that determine people's longevity at companies is if they have a friend at the company. So if your people are trailblazing, if they're breaking barriers in places in your company and have someone to get together with and talk. I just finished reading the book The Six about the first 6 female astronauts. Life got a lot better for them once they got together with each other. And you read what they went through and they needed each other. So if your employee resource group has no purpose other than to give people each other, that's still successful. Some employee resource groups were about creating more visibility for the people in their identity group to then speak and be seen, or Some employee resource groups invited I got brought into many, many companies from equity and inclusion groups, especially from women's groups, especially during March, which International Women's Day and Women's History Month. Many ERGs brought me in to speak about advancing women in the workplace, and then those groups invited executives from outside their identity group so that they could create like, "Look, see, this is what we're experiencing," or, "This is what we want you to know about how we can contribute to the company." There is nothing to say it's not successful unless that group gets somehow used or scapegoated to reduce the advancement and the feeling of inclusion and the feeling of belonging. Like, I don't wanna be in I look, I'm a member of the Writers Guild of America, it's the union for screenwriters, and I'm gonna share. I never joined the age awareness writers group, and then when I was on the committee advisory panel overseeing all the Writers Guild committees, we changed the name to the Career Longevity Committee so that it would feel more inclusive for everybody and that people would want to join. People have to decide they want to identify in a particular way, but then they have to make sure that identifying in that way doesn't marginalize them. So, an employee resource group that creates a marginalization for the members of that group is not successful. An employee resource group that just gives a sense of belonging to people in their workplace is a ringing success. An employee resource group that creates awareness for people outside of that identity group is also a success. It just all comes down to how it's played out.
So now with all the layoffs that we've experienced, like you've got companies like say Meta or Amazon, who are some of the other big notable companies that have had huge layoffs. When they have these, well, and I don't know how many of them still have employee resource groups inside of their companies at this point in time, especially with all these layoffs. What can the company do to rebuild a culture of happiness within their company with is it gonna be to develop more resource groups? I mean, what other inclusion programs can they look at?
It should be their baseline. It should be the phrase, "We want the best person for the job," is a terribly non-inclusive phrase, and people don't wanna hear that, but I have a very fun video of a game show where Black contestants were giving incredibly different answers than what the game show was looking for, and I'll give you the example. The game show, the question was, "Who sings the best love songs?" And the Black team came up with the answers Nina Simone, Whitney Houston, Bruno Mars, Boys to Men. None of those were considered correct answers. The answers were Celine Dion, Ed Sheeran, Barry Manilow, Frank Sinatra. It's like, "Wait, what?" So when you say, "Oh, we just want the best person for the job," that best person definition came from a person who already is in that job and who already thinks themselves the best person for the job. So the best person for the job is just gonna, by coincidence, be a person who looks like me and thinks like me and responds to things like me. And so when your the inclusion should be your baseline so that you're getting different the value of an inclusive culture is you get different perspectives. And different perspectives is how you reach different markets. It's how you don't you avoid horrible mistakes. There's 2 malls in Los Angeles. I lived in Los Angeles for 23 years. There's 2 very famous malls in Los Angeles. I won't shop at either of them because in both places, the women's bathroom is down a dark corridor isolated from the rest of the mall next to the parking garage. Yeah, as a woman, I don't feel safe going to the bathroom at your mall. And I looked up who designed both those malls, and they were all completely designed by men. They didn't have women involved in the design of a mall. Think about that. Who designed the bathrooms in an airport? I walk I how many times I can't even tell you having the conversation when I'm in an airport bathroom saying, "Oh, designed by a man." And every woman in the room is like, "Yep." So you want inclusion because you get better outcomes. Going as to how do you rebuild trust after a layoff? Don't have the layoff in the first place. That I can't even emphasize that enough. You didn't need the layoff. You were wrong. Now that you've had it and you say, "Oh, we were wrong. We should not have listened to big consulting firm and done this layoff." Now that you've had it, go back and say, "We were wrong. We are going to put policies in place to make sure we don't make mistakes like this in the future. Now we are going to listen to our employees. Who did we lay off who we should not have laid off? What roles aren't being fulfilled? Hey, we had 3 people doing this job and now we have 2 people doing this job. Let's talk to those 2 people and find out if their lives just got substantially worse, if they beefed up their resumes. Because I will share with you, if you had 3 people doing a job and now you have 2 people doing that job and those 2 people are stressed and overwhelmed and overworked and miserable, they're beefing up their resumes, and guess how hard it's gonna be when you have 0 people doing that job. So talk not talk to, isn't even right. Listen to your employees. Bring in a workplace happiness expert who will sit down, and the conversations I have with employees, they're so wonderful and they're so overwhelming, and I can't even tell you how many times I have a set of questions I ask that when I get the answers, I promise the employees it's anonymous, and I promise them there's not retaliation. It's in my contract that I will tell you what is said. I will never tell you who is saying it, but I can promise you leadership, if I'm reporting it to you, it's because it's an issue. It's because it's a legitimate, real issue, either because I've heard it from enough people or because I was shown evidence of it. I can't tell you how many times I'm in these conversations with these employees, and I say, I appreciate you sharing. I will take this matter to leadership, but I can't promise you anything will change. I don't have control over that. Nothing might change as a result of you sharing this with me. And I have had so many people break down in tears and say, I'm just happy to get to tell this to someone.
Oh, I know that. I was just gonna say the fact that the company's bringing in a happiness expert, or consultant, I mean, shows that the company somebody in the company cares about the employees, but there's the next step, okay? And that was kind of like my last question was looking at your crystal ball for 2026. How do you see companies branching out and making these changes based on what they've learned and based on what someone like you comes in and shares with them? Are there going to be these pivotal changes?
It goes back to all culture comes from the top down. And if we can protect our economy from get it back on the rails because our economy is off the rails. Anybody who doesn't realize that it is not they're not paying attention to the actual metrics. They're not paying attention to the complete downgrade of real wages, to the unaffordability of basics of food and housing. We have a propped up stock market that is being so falsely inflated right now, and so I don't know what direction 2026 is going to go because it requires a lot of ending of magical thinking and reality-based observation about what we can do to take care of the people who are actually doing the work in this country. We have not been doing that, and we have not been doing that for a while, where we have not prioritized the people doing the work, who make our food, who build our products, who file our taxes, whatever it is, we don't take care of the people doing the work, and that has got to change. Is that going to happen in 2026? My prayers are for it every day. What can be changed is if you are in a leadership role, you can substantially reduce your turnover and your absenteeism. You can have more sales. You can have higher profits if you will just look to the people in your workforce as the solution. Stop looking at your workforce as a cost center. Look at your workforce as your greatest asset. If you had a machine that cost $65,000 a year to run, would you let some bozo with no training run that machine? So make sure the people have the training and know what they're doing and are the most highly skilled people to do it.
Correct. And you mentioned 3 things that people need to be happy at work. It bears with repeating. Tell it say it again.
A sense of accomplishment. People need to feel that they're making progress on work that matters. They have to feel that their work makes a difference in the world. that they have accomplished something at the end of the day that is different from how they started the day. When people have a sense of accomplishment, everybody's greatest day at work is the day they made a difference in someone else's life. So find ways to give people that. And I don't care if it's somebody turning a screw on the factory line. You find a way to make sure that person understands the importance of turning that screw and how much it impacts the outcome. That's thing one. Look at every job in your workplace and figure out what is this person accomplishing and how can I make them understand that they're providing value. That's number one. Autonomy. If somebody is doing something differently than the way you would do it, that doesn't make it wrong. Even if it's a little slower, but the slowness doesn't affect the outcome. Let people develop their own way of doing things as long as you're getting the same outcomes. So autonomy is a really big people who are skilled want to be able to use their skills. Oh, going back to accomplishment, also quit robbing people of their sense of accomplishment by changing their goal line. Don't go to someone, "I need you to do A, B, and C," and they've done A, and then go, "Okay, I need you to do D and E also." Well, now they get no joy from completing A. Like, they go home at the end of the day, they finished A and B, they're working on C, they go home at the end of the day, and all they're thinking is, "Oh, I didn't finish C."
Especially if you're reducing staff and now you've only gone for 3 people and 2, like you said, and they're having to try to backfill the work that number 3 should have done if they were there, right?
Don't change somebody's goal line. And if you have to, if it's because our workplace responds to the tyranny of the urgent, and if the urgency requires somebody to get pulled off one task and put on another, great. Give them really clear directions. Say, "Hey, thanks for working on this. It's really important, but I need you to go fix that problem. That's all that matters now. Go home at the end of the day. Don't worry about this thing you're working on." Give people clear directions about what you're asking them to do, and that also gives them their sense of accomplishment. Give them autonomy, let people choose how to do the things that they are doing. And then acknowledgement, it's the easiest thing in the world. It's the easiest thing in the world.
Just a little accomplishment goes a long way.
Yeah. One attaboy wipes out a whole lot of awe hell.
Valerie, this has been the most eye-opening seriously, I am so grateful for your time today and this discussion. I am seriously like I said, it kinda went in some different directions than I expected, but it is what it is, right? That's what podcasts are for.
I love talking about all these things because I like making employees happy and successful and feel included in their jobs, and that's better for the entire economy. So it's better for me.
It is too. Oh my gosh, and you can just sense your passion in this, and it's contagious. Your passion is contagious, so, thank you. How can people find you?
I am at speakhappiness.com. That's speak, SPEAK, speakhappiness.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. It's great to connect with me on LinkedIn. So please, either of those ways.
Oh my gosh, I am so grateful to you. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure.
Right?